The main symptoms of endometriosis are chronic pelvic pain, painful periods, painful sex, painful bladder and bowel movements, and sometimes for some people problems with getting pregnant, and fatigue. Not everyone gets all symptoms, some people get one or more, so that's what endometriosis is. And one of the reasons we started the endometriosis friendly employer scheme was because we had so many responses from people with endometriosis saying my employer doesn't get it, and I have real first-hand evidence of that. So in my previous job, before I was CEO here, when I started, I was introduced to one of my teams, and they, and when I was being introduced by HR, they said, oh, and in this team we've got two people, and Sarah's just a bit flaky. I mean, she's really good sometimes, but not always. She's just flaky. And when I actually met Sarah, who was an incredibly dedicated and hard-working person, turned out she had endometriosis, and so every possibly 2 or 3 periods she did need to take some time off, but she was incredibly hardworking. She planned around it, she did all that, yet she'd been labelled flaky because no one had understood or taken the time to understand what endometriosis was. Meanwhile, the person she sat next to, Shane went on a stag weekend overseas, had to come back and have surgery because he'd done something to his leg, had 6 weeks off work, but Shane was never labelled flaky because everyone understood he'd had an accident. So I think for we hear so many stories about how important it is that employers support people with endometriosis. And I think it's probably worth saying that endometriosis is a spectrum condition. So some people might have endometriosis and very few symptoms, or they might have symptoms they can manage 100%, whereas other people at the other end of the spectrum may have problems either on a cyclical nature or continually. And one of the things that we find with employers is that because, and I don't know about you, but certainly when I had my management training, I was always told to look out for people who had the odd day off every month. They were skiving. And so we have this thing where, and if you only use the Bradford scale, we actually penalise people for having a regular monthly condition. It's actually, you get marked higher on the Bradford scale. You'll be labelled by people who've been told to watch out for everyone who's having the odd Friday or Monday off, etc. So I think there really is some perceptions we need to change about having menstrual conditions. And I think the other thing, and one of the reasons we're all here today, is to talk about endometriosis. Is one of the biggest issues, especially for the very, people in entry-level careers, is just having the courage to talk about something that they think they or their boss might find embarrassing. And so what we did is, because of those reasons, we worked initially with Standard Life Aberdeen to develop and launch the endometriosis friendly employer scheme. We wanted to work with a really big company to show that it could be done. What we've done is basically set up a scheme where organisations commit to being endometriosis friendly. I like to think it's really simple. If you've got good HR practices, it should be a doddle, because what you're doing is really looking at your HR practices and just ensuring that you're taking into account those with endometriosis who might have cyclical conditions, and making sure that managers are aware of the disease, so that if somebody does come and speak to them, they don't just go like, what is that? But they say, oh yes, I've seen something on the intranet about that, or oh yes, I know that is there. And also we recommend an endometriosis champion in each organisation, so that there's always somebody, if an employee does have nervousness about speaking to them, or a manager wants to get help, they can speak to them as well. And one of the things that's been really interesting in the last year, although obviously, there's been so many horrific things with the pandemic, is for some people with endometriosis, being able to work from home has been a real benefit. And I think that, if we go back 18 months, so many companies were saying, no, you can't possibly work at home or have the odd day at home. Whereas now that we've shown that many people can. So I think there's some really good learnings from COVID about taking forward from an HR perspective of how do we support people who may be avoiding a commute, would really help them occasionally with their work. So Rosie, that was my 5-minute introduction. So I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Emma, for everything that you've shared there. We're now going to pass to Kathryn from Standard Life. And Kathryn, it would be great if you could share with us a little bit about how Standard Life and Endometriosis UK have worked together, and as well as your learnings from being the first endometriosis friendly employer. Welcome, Kathryn.
Sure, thank you, and thank you very much for having me here. Obviously, I confess that I have a real interest in this. When I joined the company, I went along to a meeting and where Standard Life were talking about the fact that they were going to be doing a campaign called Beyond the Invisible. And they were going to be linking up with the Endometriosis Society in order to raise the awareness. And at the end of the meeting, I went to Susie at the time and said, I'd like to be involved because I suffer from endometriosis and it took me 13 years to get diagnosed. And that was at the early part of my career. And I really struggled with all of the things that Isis just mentioned. So I think, you know, it is absolutely vital that we get this out in the open and that we empower employers to be able to have the information and get people talking about it. And, you know, we did this through joining up and doing what ended up to be quite a powerful campaign, obviously working with Rankin, with the photography and videography and augmented reality, and running this gallery where we took the stories of 11 different women. And through that, you could see the spectrum, exactly what we just discussed, the whole spectrum of how it can impact on people. And obviously, as a financial services company, we're also thinking about, you know, what's the financial impact on people if you're not able to work and if you're getting penalized for taking regular days off? You know, this is all going to add up. And women are disadvantaged by that. And we know that in this industry, in the financial services industry, we're disadvantaged in quite a few different ways. So we wanted to try and help sort of shift some of that viewpoint. I think what we have done as an employer, we have an area on our intranet now where we keep all of the information. So we have documents that are there for managers to get them to actually understand what endometriosis is, and why we need to be flexible and adaptable. And if people come and say that they're suffering from endometriosis, then we have the tools there to say, okay, I understand this, so let's have a look at how we can work. I think what you've said about COVID, you know, having this impact now, in a way, it's actually, I think, going to bring about a bit more change, because it's been more manageable for people because they have been able to work from home and because we've had to adjust. I think everybody's had to adjust. It's not a 9 till 5 world anymore. I think that's absolutely out the window. But that's across the board from every level now. And I think that's the difference that we didn't have before. So now we can have those broader, better conversations. And I think one of the key things that I got actually was from another manager who came to me, a male manager, and said, you know what, I'm really glad I learned about this. He said, because I've got daughters. He said, I need to know this. They're young now, but I need to know this and understand it and look out for the signs, you know, so that I can help in that way too. So it had a really broad application. I think if we want to talk about, you know, what worked well as part of that campaign, I think number one was removing the stigma. I was talking to people this week and they said, you know what, actually, we've heard more about endometriosis now in the past couple of years. We never heard about it before. And they were talking about that it was on the BBC only a couple of them, I think earlier on in the week on International Women's Day, it was highlighted on that. So there's definite traction. I think the fact that we've been able to, you know, educate our employees and our managers to get a better understanding has been great. And also I'm an endometriosis champion in the company, and I've had people come to me and talk to me, and I've been very happy to point them in the right direction for the right level of support and give them sort of broader information that they need. So that's kind of worked. I think the learnings are people are uncomfortable talking about periods. They're uncomfortable talking about this. And we were trying to get beyond that. You know, it's just a point where this just needs to become, it's fact. It's a fact. It has an impact. We need to understand the impact, and we need to help people to be able to work around that for their benefit and for the business benefit. What are the challenges? I think in any company, the challenges are that you need to get this buy-in from the top down. A lot of work. So we did a lot of internal processes, a lot of work on the intranet to sort of get the message out there. We've got a lot of different locations, like globally. And again, that's a challenge too, because in different regions, it's a different approach. But we're still working with that, and we're still continuing to push it. And again, the other impact is, you know, continuing to help the men in our company understand it more And again, taking that angle of, you've got wives, mothers, sisters, you know, children. This is for everybody. It's not just you know, just for us. Everybody needs to get involved. So I think we were really delighted to be able to help out, and we are going to continue to help by funding some research and a research project with some university students to really further try and get more information to try and help us be able to identify endometriosis far more easily and with a less invasive kind of processes. So I think that's it, my 5 minutes. Hopefully I haven't overrun.
That's wonderful, Kathryn. Thank you so much for sharing that and sharing kind of all the work that Standard Life has done so far. I think I certainly agree and really echo that point that actually endometriosis is something for all of us to be aware of. And it's been so encouraging through the Endometriosis Friendly Employer Scheme so far to see you know, husbands, partners sign up as endometriosis champions because they themselves want to be allies and know more and do more about the condition. And so thank you so much for sharing that. Next, I'm really pleased to welcome Shazia to share a little bit about her experience being a CEO, living with endometriosis. And Shazia, it would also be great to hear a little bit on your perspective about how endometriosis can impact people at work and your learnings and recommendations for other employers.
Sure, thank you so much for having me, and it's really nice to be talking about this in such a positive way. And as Emma said, you know, we were in Parliament a year ago, and I was also involved in the exhibition that Standard Life did an amazing job with a couple of years ago. And I feel like slowly but surely we're getting the word out, which will hopefully drive some real progress. So being a chief exec with endometriosis, I don't even know where to start, to be honest. I mean, my journey in terms of my career, living with a condition like this, you know, I was really fortunate at the start because I worked for a large FMCG, a big global business, where it was okay to get a couple of weeks off work when you're having a surgery. But it's the same as what Emma said. If you're taking too much time off, people are suspicious. It's just the way it is. And I don't think, you know, I look back and I don't necessarily blame any of them for thinking that way, because they were just unaware. And that's what's really key here is that we're able to drive some awareness and open up the conversation. The interesting thing for me was when I came to the company I'm at now, Neuro, I actually came in as head of business development, and I had my second surgery a few years back working in this company, and I wasn't the chief exec at the time. And I got my 2 weeks off. I worked for an amazing CEO then. She was very supportive. But, you know, there was a lot around the recovery and being employed when you have a condition like this, which isn't always accounted for. And I think, again, that's where the conversation needs to be opened up. For example, it takes a long time for anaesthetic to work its way out of your system, and there are some mental health repercussions upon having sort of a surgery like this, as well as just being ill a lot of the time. And then when I got told, it was actually 2 years ago on the 6th of March, when Heather Andrew, who was the CEO, said, in 3 months' time, I'm leaving, you're taking over as chief exec. And I was really shocked and happy, delighted. You know, it's not often a woman of colour in her 30s gets a CEO gig, so I was thrilled. But one of the worst things in my head was, how the hell am I going to manage this if I have to have another op or if I'm too sick? And part of me wanted to turn it down because of that. And that's big, you know, that's a huge problem where we're seeing the stats with COVID, where women are disproportionately losing jobs because of what's going on, whether they're putting their hands up for furlough or redundancy. And I know that it's not just women who suffer from endometriosis. There are people who don't identify as women who suffer from it too, but there's a disproportionate negative impact on women off the back of COVID. Add this into the mix, you know, we've got a lot working against us, and it shouldn't be something that works against us, specifically given the fact that, you know, that 1 in 10 statistic, which I'm sure everybody's heard time and time again, it's not just for endo, but people with diabetes who are across every gender and background, you know, that's an equivalent stat, and there's so much more attention paid to it. When it comes to kind of the way that I've managed this and the advice maybe, or some of the thoughts that I'd have around employees and employers sort of dealing with this, I made it a point to have a really open culture of conversation. And I think that empathy is key. It's, you know, I feel like, you know, we've all said the same thing time and time again, and I'm not sure what it'll take for it to finally manifest, but that's really important. And this whole piece around periods being a taboo, that needs to be cracked and broken, because it is a natural part of what a woman or a person with that part of their anatomy goes through. And I believe we should talk about it in the same way we talk about anything else. I think the other thing is, in the same way as when people have said, how do we diversify our board when it comes to gender and race? It's about creating a business case. It's the same thing here. If you don't understand it, your business will be negatively impacted by performance and, you know, how much time, money you can make. And so actually there is a business case there. And, you know, I work in the company I run is a neuroscience-based market research company. So my job is about understanding human behavior. And the best and worst part of human behavior is our innate want to know what's in it for me. And so ultimately, you know, taking note of this condition, given that it impacts so many people, is beneficial to every business out there. So the employers need to understand it. They need to make an effort to get to grips with it in the same way they would with any kind of condition. I think with COVID, there's been some really interesting points raised about how now that we work from home, that makes it a little bit easier because there's less of the commute. It's also made things quite hard because treatments have been stopped. People are sicker. They're not exercising in the same way. I know for me, I used to do weight training, strength training at the gym with a PT, and I can't do that right now. And I have noticed a change in how well I've been off the back of that. So, you know, it's even more important now as we are less connected and less sort of in front of each other in person, that employers take into account that, you know, they need to make the effort to understand the people that they work with, who work for them, who work alongside them, and utilize that empathy. And I also really firmly believe, and I've put a few LinkedIn posts out about this, if you don't understand, ask someone who does. So there's a few of us out there who are willing to have a conversation. And I've said to sort of people in my network, if you're leading and running a business and you're not sure, it's okay to pick up the phone and give me a call. You know, I'll talk to you about if you're embarrassed, how to have a conversation. And we need to reach out to our networks more. We need to be better at being connected, and we need that empathy above and beyond anything else.
Thanks so much, Shazia. I think you've raised so much that is really important for many of us on the call today to consider further. So thank you very much indeed. And to Shazia's point as well around employers feeling free to ask the questions if you don't have all the information. Just to say that various resources after the session will also be circulated, as Endometriosis UK are really keen to stand with any employer that wants to support their employees with endometriosis better. So thank you so much, Shazia. I'm next going to welcome Lisa from Merseyside Police. So Merseyside Police joined a few months ago as an endometriosis friendly employer. And Lisa, it would be great to hear a little bit about how and why Merseyside Force decided to join the scheme and the benefits that you may have seen so far. Over to you, Lisa.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. As you said, I work for Merseyside Police. I'm an inspector at the moment. The scheme came about, I think it was a one-woman crusade at the beginning, i.e. me. I've suffered from endometriosis for about 9 years now. And unlike other organisations, it's very difficult to manage endometriosis while you're out and about dealing with 999 calls in a patrol car or standing on a crime scene for a number of hours or sitting with a prisoner in a hospital. And I was finding it really, really difficult when I have flare-ups to actually manage to do my role at times, which was really upsetting because I love my job. I had around 4 or 5 surgeries, and as other people have alluded to, the issue around sickness was really concerning for me. There's a negative connotation within an organisation that if you have time off, it may affect your promotional opportunities. So I found, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people, I found that I was taking annual leave to cover my surgeries. and not telling people about it, which is now I'm a bit more wiser, I suppose, which is absolutely a horrific thing. You shouldn't have to do that. And then I was forcing myself to come back into work early. So a couple of years ago, I became the vice chair of our women's network. And I started on my one-woman crusade to get people to understand endometriosis and work around a lot of other gynecological issues in relation to females in the workplace. I'm sure as many people will know that the police is heavily dominated by males. So all my line managers up until about a year ago had always been men. Luckily, I'm quite a confident and forthright person, so I was happy to speak to them about it. But I know there's a lot of people in my organisation who suffer from endometriosis who are just too embarrassed, too nervous, too conscientious to actually approach A, a line manager in general, but B, a male line manager. So I used Endometriosis UK quite a lot for my personal journey, and when I seen the Endometriosis Friendly Employer Scheme, I jumped right on it. It was very, very simple for our organisation to get on it. I just explained to our wellbeing and HR. I think, as you said at the beginning, if you've got a good HR process in place, it's very, very simple to sign up to it. I think the hardest thing is raising a purchase order, but I think that's in any organisation, isn't it? So we jumped on the scheme last year. The benefits so far are the overwhelming response I've had from twofold: females in the organisation, or people identify as females, coming forward and saying, actually, thank you so much for raising this, I've suffered from it, how do you do this, what do you do for this, how do you manage when you're on a crime scene? But also, like, just echoing what the other two said before me, men in the workplace. I've had some really, really heartfelt and touching correspondence from male employees who said, thank you so much, my wife suffers from this, my daughter suffered from this, and you've given me a real insight into what it is. The main thing for me as an individual, as part of that organisation, is to ensure that we encourage new recruits to come in, even if they suffer from the condition, to understand that it can be covered under the Disability Act, that we can, as an organisation, make reasonable adjustments. So some of the adjustments I make, for example, with my staff, is we allow them to change their uniform. If they need to be desk-based for a shift, they can be desk-based. Anyone who knows me within my organisation knows I often just wander around the office with a hot water bottle attached to me. And then people ask me what's the problem, and that's about raising awareness as well. So it's just about making little changes to help people understand that it doesn't have to be the be all and end all of your career, but there are, relevant changes that we can make in any organisation, not just desk-based organisations, but quite active ones like mine.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing that, and thank you so much for pursuing your one-woman crusade, which has obviously had such an impact for so many people at Merseyside Police. We really appreciate everything that you've done.
Yeah, sorry, can I just before I go, the one-woman crusade is now turned into about a 50-woman crusade, and we've got about, I think we've got at least 15 police organisations across the UK who've now signed up as a result of it. Yeah. And we've got a national endometriosis working group, so it's been received really well by chief officers and those who we need to get to listen. So yeah, it's doing really well. I'm not on my own no more.
We're delighted to hear it and really grateful for everything you've done. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much to all our panellists. We're next going to just move to a few of the questions that have come in from attendees. Please feel free, if you're listening in, if other questions do spring to mind, feel free to continue putting those through. I'm just going to have a little look and share the ones that we've got in so far. One question we have come in, which I might direct over to you, Emma, if that's okay, is whether endometriosis is classed as a disability, because I know there's various kind of comments around that.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Rosie, and thank you for the question, a really good one. As you'll know from the disability definition of the Equalities Act 2010 or 2015, I forget where we are now, but under the Equalities Act, the definition of a disability is if something disables somebody and interferes with their everyday life. It doesn't list many conditions. What we say is that endometriosis can absolutely be disabling for some people, but it isn't for everybody. There is also under the Act provision for recurring or fluctuating effects. And I think one of the issues that people sometimes get a little bit hung up on is that somebody might find themselves disabled continually, where some people might find it intermittent. And Una King, who's in the House of Lords, described her endometriosis as being disabled 1 in 4 weeks. And I think sometimes people think then it doesn't count, but actually, as I say, there is an allowance for recurring or fluctuating effects of a condition. So that's a long answer. So it is disabling for some people. It is disabling, not for everybody, but it is for some. And if it is, then we would hope that people would be supported in that way. But also, you know, do speak to the individual and see what works for them, because some people will need support on a different ongoing basis. While I've got the floor, if I may, there's something that a couple of people have mentioned around surgery. And this is the one thing we hear all the time, which is people saying, you know, I had surgery, I had to have other surgery, and I was told I'd had my surgery, why didn't it work? And I think one of the issues that we find is people with the reluctance to talk about it, people find then they're not supported to have the time off work they need. As Shazia said, it can take a while to report. And I do know someone who I know really well, and she actually had to have 2 surgeries. One, she had a bowel resection and colostomy, and 8 months later she had her colostomy reversed, and she was sacked. Well, she was sacked, basically. I know that's not right, but she was, because she'd already had her surgery. And I think, again, it's looking at making sure that you have procedures in terms of ongoing conditions, and that they, you know, you support people in that way.
Thanks so much, Emma. We've also had a question come through around liaising with senior leadership, which I'm wondering if I could direct to you, Lisa, if that's okay, knowing that you come from an environment where there's lots of different levels. So, Lisa, the question's around if there's any advice available on kind of how best to approach the topic or raise it with senior leadership. And I wonder if there's anything you could share from your own experience there.
Yeah. I suppose the best way is to, what we said at the beginning, what Emma said, is to try and make it within your organisation not a taboo subject. Approaching senior leaders can be really daunting to a lot of people in any organisation. It was for me originally, but I don't know if you've got an internal communications thing. We have something called Jammer in our organisation. So I originally just started by putting bits on that and tagging senior leaders in it. Sometimes you've got to be a little bit cheeky, you know, send out a newsletter and make sure you include them in. I used to produce my own little newsletters. I'm not technically amazing. I just used to do it on Word, but you know, a simple fact sheet on what endometriosis is and the employer scheme. Or contact Endometriosis UK. The package that they provide and the information on the website about the employer scheme is absolutely fantastic. And in my opinion, if you manage to give it to one rank above you or one manager level above you and include that person, then it should have a domino effect. So it's not always about skipping to the very top and getting someone to say yes. It's about recruiting people along all the levels, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lisa. We've got another question come through, which I might see if Emma has any thoughts on, if that's all right with you, Emma. So the question is, what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to write a more one-size-fits-all flexible working approach for a flex condition like endometriosis?
When we've spoken to people who have done this, I think it's firstly recognising right from the beginning that there can be fluctuating conditions. So having that in from the start, so that if somebody's recognised that having a chronic condition that fluctuates, and there are other conditions like arthritis and others as well, that's already written in from the start. So everything's not done on like one specific area. And I think as well, it's quite a lot of it we find is actually around communication, has just been said by Lisa and others, which is around making sure that everyone in the workforce is aware that you can have endometriosis or other menstrual conditions, and so it doesn't become a thing that's either not talked about or diminished in importance going forward. So I think it's a difficult one. I'm sure they'll, you know, sort of, it's a long answer and a short answer, I know, but I think starting from the basis that there's, you're saying that you recognise that people might have conditions that fluctuate, and I think then again working with people to identify what works in your business, because not some businesses like Standard Life we've been talking about and Shazia's company have allowed flexible working. Of course, if you are in a role where you might be on the shop floor or something, that can be harder. So I think it's from HR, from those different industries, to look at what is the most appropriate way that they can support people through flexible working.
Thanks, Emma. Those are some really helpful suggestions there. I did have one question that I wanted to direct over to Shazia. Shazia, you mentioned earlier that when you were offered your position as chief exec, you nearly turned it down because of the condition you were living with. I wondered if you might be able to share just a bit about what made you push through with that, and any advice you could offer either for employees with endometriosis looking to progress their careers, or employers looking to kind of support their employees to progress.
Yeah, so there were a couple of things. One was, I mean, I was fortunate enough, and possibly just because I've got a bit of a big mouth, I talked about it very openly with the people who sit on the UK board. I've got a non-exec director who is male, a sort of middle-aged white male, as most boards have on them, and he effectively, you know, listened, because I said, look, this is something I have, and it's equivalent to if somebody turned around to you and said that they have very severe asthma, or if they said I have a mental health issue, you wouldn't brush it under the carpet. You'd put in place the things that needed to be put in place in order to make it work. Because if somebody's qualified to do a job and they're going to deliver, then ultimately what the business needs to put in place is a support mechanism to help enhance that for them, rather than to say you have a condition, you are not fit for purpose. So I talked about it openly, and then I had the support there. The other thing for me that was quite important was I had to tell myself, and this is something for people who struggle with endometriosis, you know, it's really tough. It's really tough, not just because it's physically quite debilitating, but also it's mentally really difficult. And you have to kind of go, okay, I'm not going to let it control me, I'm going to control it. And there's some sort of work that has to be done on the self. And that's so much easier said than done. But a lot of it was to do with, you know, me having conversations and saying, this is what it looks like, this is what I may struggle with, here's kind of the help that I might need. And I think the individual, it's unfortunate, but we have to do a lot of the work here just to get people to listen and see. It's the same as with any kind of awareness driving activity. When it comes to the gender discussion or the race discussion, the people who are the minority tend to be the ones who are speaking a lot of the time. And it's the same with this at the moment. And I think what's really become quite clear to me is most of the time you will come across people who just don't know and therefore don't understand. And so the first thing you need to know is to make them aware. That's the first step. And I always say, go in with a strong, confident, objective perspective, you know, and it's okay to say things like, it's really difficult because it will impact my mental health, but, you know, say it with courage in your convictions and also belief that what you're saying is valid, rather than doubting ourselves, which is something that, you know, comes with the territory. I mean, I don't even know, I think all the women who are here listening and the women who are on this panel who struggle with the condition know just how much it can mess with your mind, and how much disbelief you have in yourself. And that's a really big part of the conversation, is believing and then putting forward a case.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that, Shazia. even if we reflect on to the all-party parliamentary group who released their report into endometriosis at the end of last year, that survey had over 10,000 respondents of women living with endometriosis, and 81% of those replied to say that their endometriosis had either negatively or very negatively impacted on their mental health. So we know that is a huge kind of factor that needs to be navigated, and beginning that conversation really is the first step.
And sorry, there's one other thing, which is just that alongside that, I was on a panel last year when the first Do No Harm report was published by Baroness Cumberledge. And, you know, a big part of that was around I guess, the gap between, you know, conditions that are of female reproductive organs versus when they're across genders. And we've got a bigger job to do, just because most of the people that employees are going to be speaking to will be men, because most of the people who sit at the top of the ladder will be men, and therefore unaffected most of the time by this condition. And I think that that's where that awareness thing comes in. I've worked for guys, and I know men in my network who didn't know what it was, and as soon as I've posted something, they've gone, wow, I did not realize this was a thing. Can you please tell me more, or I will push the word out a bit more. You can build alliance, but they don't know if they don't know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had another question come in related to that, which I was thinking I might direct to Kathryn, if that's all right with you, Kathryn. Somebody on the call has asked what men can do to be better allies for those with endometriosis. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on that from your experience at Standard Life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly about having that conversation and not being afraid to have that conversation. I think we can be quite quick to judge and say, oh, they just won't understand. But exactly as Shazia's just said, it actually, if you talk to them and communicate, they don't know what they don't know. So it's down to us to actually give that sort of education, have those honest conversations. You know, I spoke to my boss when I was getting involved in this, and he had 2 young daughters, and he's the one who said to me, I need to know this stuff, you know. But even for me, having that conversation, and you know, and I've through my career, I've had 5 lots of surgery, and that was at the start. I came into a career late. I was in my early 30s, and I'd already had 2 lots of surgery at that point. I went through 3 more rounds in what were supposed to be those years of your career where you're kind of moving forward, and it definitely had an impact. I mean, you know, I had things sent to my house for me to proofread and sign off the day after I come out of hospital from surgery. Trying to get from upstairs to the front door to open the door took a while. But it's things like that. So you have to just keep going and having the conversations. And I'm a member of a number of networks within the company now. So Young Persons Development Network, Balance Network, things like that. And again, it's taking the opportunity to have those conversations with people and just say, do you realize we have this resource? Do you realize we're an endometriosis friendly employer? And if not, it's just worth reading up, finding out a little bit more, and just keeping the conversation going. I think that's what it is. This isn't just about a one and done. Yeah. So it's not just about pointing to the things that we have done. It's about, okay, we need to look forward and look to the future. What can we continue to do to support people in the workplace through this?
Absolutely. Lisa, I'm not sure if you have anything further to share there around sort of what male colleagues can do around that dialogue around endometriosis, just from your experience working in a pretty male-dominated environment. Lisa, you're on mute.
Yes, got ya. I was trying to get the mute button. Technology. Yeah, I think I just echo what was said there. It's about finding, if it's not you, then that's fine, but it's about finding someone who's got the confidence to speak. I'm working with Endo UK at the moment to get a bespoke training package for all line managers within Merseyside Police, because I think training is a really, really big thing. I just want to point out as well, though, that it's not just males that don't get it. It's other females. I've found that's quite a big barrier to my progression. The condescending comments sometimes you get from other women. Oh, I have period pains. What's the difference? Oh, I get menstrual cramps. Yeah, you know, just stick a heat pad on and get on with it. So it's about explaining to people that that's not the case. And, you know, I think with the male colleagues, I think what Shazia said before, I think is trying to tap into the fact that everyone will have a mum, a sister, a daughter, an auntie, and explaining to them that this could happen to their relative or their loved one. And I suppose just saying to them, well, how would you feel if that's how your child was treated because they're of a condition that they've got absolutely no control over, and just happens to be something that at the moment we still don't have a cure for. I don't know. It's all about learning and educating. And what Emma was saying at the very, very beginning, it's not one size fits all. My elder sister has endometriosis, and she lost lots of jobs when she was younger because she used to be hospitalised monthly when she had her periods due to the pain. She then conceived. It helped. Can I just put it out there, if anyone's doctor tells them to have a baby to cure themselves of endometriosis, please just shout in their faces that that's not right, because I'm sick of hearing that as well. Have a baby to fix it. But so she suffered monthly and now she's a lot better, whereas I suffer daily. I constantly have pain. So what Shazia said about it affects your mental health. If you can't tap into a male colleague, manager, talking about the physical side of it, then tap in using the mental health side of it, because I know organisations don't ignore that. So, you know, there's other avenues in. It shouldn't be the way we have to do it, but sometimes it is the way we have to. So, yeah, hopefully that answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa. Emma, I'm looking back at you. So we've had a couple of questions I'd like to direct your way. So firstly, someone's asked a question around what the first step could be towards becoming a more inclusive employer. And linked to that, as Endometriosis UK are a very small organisation ourselves, another person has asked what small organisations can do, what steps they can take to become endometriosis friendly.
Thank you. So I think in terms of the first steps, what can people do to the first steps is I'm duty bound to say this anyway, but I'd check out our endometriosis friendly website and check it out there. And I think that for a lot of HR teams, if you're in a big organisation, actually you'll probably have most of the policies in place. It might be a case of tweaking a bit of information provision. And I think really the first steps are around making sure that you recognise, as we said, intermittent conditions, so the conditions that don't necessarily happen every day. For some people, as Lisa's just said, it is every day, but not for everybody. And I think making sure that you haven't got policies in place that penalise if people have off a regular pattern, if they've got a reason for it. And I think then about it's being open is you know, given that it's 1 in 10 women or those who sign female at birth, if you're over a certain size organisation, you're very likely to have somebody with endometriosis in the workforce. And of course, people shouldn't be outed if they don't want to be, but see if there's somebody there who would like to, you know, share their views, just have a short talk. People do lunches and learns, etc. So I think it's really just making sure that you add it to one of your lists of conditions you're aware of. And what we find as well, and we've talked to both men and women, but just making sure there's just a brief description of what endometriosis is, so that if someone says to their manager, oh, I've got endometriosis, they can actually find some help there. In terms of small organisations, yeah, we're a really small organisation. We try and be endometriosis friendly employer, obviously. I think really it's about considering the roles that you have and the flexibility that you do. So we're a small organisation. We don't have an in-house HR team. We have outsourced. But in terms of talking to our colleagues, understanding what their health patterns are, looking at flexible ways of working, whether that's requests for things like reduced hours, or an option for one of the requests we've had is for an option for compressed hours. So somebody who knows that they will have certain times of the month where they would like to reduce their hours, but they can make them up at other times should they wish to, or to take the time off, obviously. I think really it's been about being open and honest. And whilst we're talking about endometriosis, is hopefully these policies will help anybody with any menstrual condition going forward, because obviously they're things that don't just apply to endometriosis.
Rosie, can I add something to that actually? So I think Emma's point around the policy piece is super important, and I don't know if there are any HR professionals listening, but policies are one step. Culture is the big piece here, because when it comes to the conversation around inclusion, That's diversity and inclusion is such a hot topic right now. And I sit the market research industry, we have a sort of governing body, I guess, called the Market Research Society, and I sit on their Diversity and Inclusion Council. And one of the things that we often discuss is not just around the documentation in place and the pledges that people sign, but it's how those things can help to drive a culture of inclusion. And that's where, the HR folks can put policies in place, but there needs to be dialogue from the top down and from the bottom up that drives a changing culture of inclusion.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Shazia. Without the cultural shift alongside policy, endometriosis just becomes a word that sits on a shelf in a file somewhere. So that makes absolute sense. We've had another question come through, which I might put to either Kathryn or Shazia, whoever's happiest to take it. So the question's around sort of managing a heavy workload and work stress alongside endometriosis, and what you do if actually your workload is too hard to manage alongside endometriosis, and whether either of you have had any experience of that and any advice to offer.
I'm happy to go.
Yes, that's all right.
I think we can. I think we've both probably got enough stories to cover this.
Yeah.
Both answer. So, I have an example. Actually, I was doing a roadshow for a large national news publisher a while back, and I woke up one day and my pelvic pain was so bad I could barely walk. And this is obviously pre-pandemic when we were allowed to go to places. And I remember calling up and no one could do the job. And it was pre-CEO time. I was head of BD, and I got in the shower and I cried for 20 minutes, and I put on my running shoes because they were the only shoes that I could walk in, and I made myself get to this office so I could do this roadshow. And I put my makeup on in the toilets there because I had been crying so much there was no point in putting it on before I'd left the house. And then I got somebody who worked for the newspaper to find me as many painkillers as they possibly could. When the workload gets heavy, that was me back then, sometimes just turn around and say, I need to put myself first. One of the things that I find is it comes back to what Emma said, what Lisa said, what Kathryn said around the flexibility of working. If it gets too much, I think putting in reasonable breaks in order to regroup is important. So like now we're working from home, this is one of the benefits. If I'm feeling really ropey on a day, I will do 20 minutes of like a yin yoga practice on the floor and just block my diary, because ultimately for any given business, if you aren't functioning well enough, you're not going to do a good enough job. And so it doesn't matter how busy we think we are and how important we think we are. We will do a rubbish job at it if we're not up to our best selves. And so putting ourselves first is so important. And the version of me that existed then, no, I'm not curing cancer. So, my job can wait if my health is in jeopardy. So that's what I'd suggest. I think when it comes to the heavy load, it's about understanding where you can take the time for self-care. I think also I do a lot of work on understanding myself, my pain, how my body works, and that's really helped me to be able to put the right coping mechanisms in place to be able to function really, really well. I also run the support groups for Endometriosis UK, and I come across women in lots of different roles at lots of different stages in their lives, and some of them say, look, we feel hopeless and we can't do this. And I'm like, go away and do some work on understanding yourself, and then find the things you can put in place to help get to your full potential. I'm not sure if that helps answer the question at all, but it's just sort of a little example of sort of my approach to it.
Yes, certainly, Shazia. Thank you so much. I think that certainly is helpful. Kathryn, is there anything you would add there from your own experiences around sort of managing workload, work stress alongside endometriosis symptoms?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that you sort of touched on before is physical well-being as well as the mental well-being. It's that ability to get out. Right now, I block out time in my diary to go for a walk on a daily basis. Otherwise, I'd be at my desk on Zoom from 8 in the morning till 7 at night, wouldn't see daylight. That's not good for anybody. And it's exactly that. You need to put your own oxygen mask on first. As a leader, I cannot stand there and espouse to my teams that, we've got to do all this. We're looking after your mental health. We've got a lot of support mechanisms in place. But if I don't do that myself, there's a trickle down effect. So I make it very clear to my team, I have time blocked, I'm going for a walk. And sometimes I'll do a walk-in call, but you exactly that. You need to understand what your levels are, what your own personal sort of battle is with endometriosis, and how you can shore yourself up at certain times when things do get a little bit heavy and workloads do get heavy. And again, you also need to be aware that ability to say no. You know, you don't have to take everything on. You need that ability to say no sometimes as well, but you do it for the right reasons. And that's because, you know, you've got to look after yourself. You've only got one you need to make sure you use that properly. Sorry, that was just the postman knocking on the door.
That's all right. We're all living through this pandemic and working from home. That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Kathryn. Flipping that on its head a little bit, Lisa, we've also had a few questions through around people struggling with endometriosis symptoms when they're not desk-based and they're working in roles where they might be on their feet a lot and in very different contexts. Do you have any advice on that from your own experiences?
There's lots of little things that I've done to help manage it. I think that the hardest part about it is a lot of endometriosis is managed with painkillers, and in my job, obviously, and I think I read another one, there's a few nurses online, you can't take certain painkillers while you're working because you need to be able to function. Someone also mentioned something about brain fog. I suffer from that horrifically. I'll be like looking at someone like they're stupid because they don't understand what I'm saying when I haven't actually said anything. So it's about, I think what Shazia said, it's about finding out what works for you. So I tend to ensure I've got low level painkillers on me, make sure I drink water. I use hot pain pads. I don't know if anyone's got those, or those little hotties that you have for your gloves. I put them in my pockets. They seem to help me. But it's about recognising when you're getting to the point where you can't stand up no more. Like Shazia said, sometimes you can't get out of bed. I've been in A&E in my full uniform at times where I've just pushed and pushed and pushed, and then I've got to the point where I'm like, yeah, I need to go and see someone now. So I've gone in my full kit. So it's mainly about really taking priority and ownership of your own self-care. If your job physically doesn't allow you to sit down, then it's about finding the little things that help you. One thing that does help me loads, and it's very discreet, is a TENS machine. I don't know if anybody on here has used one of those. You can get them for like £18 off Amazon. Little sticky patches. It sits in your pocket because it's only really small, and it helps so much. So that's a bit of advice that I've got if you're out and about. Yeah, there's no real answer. There's no one fits all, is there? It's just what works best for you, I suppose.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lisa. Really helpful kind of practical tips there, from somebody who knows. I'm mindful we've actually reached the end of our lunchtime slot today. So I just want to thank all our panellists so much for joining us. Thank you to Shazia, Emma, Kathryn and Lisa. I'm also mindful that we've had a lot more questions than we've had time for, which is a brilliant problem to have. So just to say on that, that we will respond to as many of those as we can sort of after today. If anyone had much more specific questions sort of to individual situations, please feel free to contact Endometriosis UK support services directly. And there were also a lot of questions around kind of policy and resources that people can use to help progress support for people with endometriosis in the workplace. So just to say that those resources and information on our endometriosis friendly employer scheme will be shared with all registered attendees after today's session. So thank you very much everyone for joining us, and I hope the rest of your day goes smoothly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.